Or to the cloud. All right, so welcome. Before I throw it over to our guest, I'm going to read a little bio, let you know who you're here to see. Dr. Steve Gennaro is a globally recognized leader in child and youth studies whose interdisciplinary work bridges theory, practice, and policy in youth development. Over more than 2 decades, he's pioneered innovative approaches to understanding how social, psychological, and digital dimensions shape young people's lives. As a founding member of York University's groundbreaking Children, Childhood, and Youth Studies program, the first of its kind in Canada, his leadership established a hub of international influence and excellence in children's rights, research, and education. A celebrated scholar and author of 4 books, Dr. Gennaro's work continues to inform academic discourse and hands-on approaches for advocating for young people. Recognized for his contributions to advancing children's rights, Dr. Gennaro has been appointed to Canada's Child Rights Academic Network and to the European Academy of Sciences in Ukraine. He's currently a visiting researcher at the University of Bologna and continues to spearhead global collaborations on best practices in sport, play, and youth development. We're super excited to have him here. So over to you, Dr. Gennaro.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, it's nice to see all of you virtually. For those of you who have your cameras on, that's outstanding. For those of you who don't, that's okay too, because in a moment when I share my screen, I won't get to see any faces. So no worries, cameras on or cameras off. I want to just quickly give you an outline of what's going to happen so you get a sense of how we will do this tonight. The topic I'm going to engage you with is the Convention of the Rights of the Child and Sustainable Development Goals, which in most places that I go into is kind of unfamiliar material. So some of you may know a little bit about it. I'm going to assume that there's not a base knowledge in that. And that's okay, because what I'm here to do tonight is advocate on behalf of that. I'm here to introduce you to the subject matter. So if you're further along in the journey, that's wonderful. Play along anyways. There's lots to hopefully for each of us to learn as we go. So having said that, especially because we're in a virtual space as well. Tonight will be a little less interactive in the beginning, but there'll be a long period at the end for you to ask questions, not to worry. And so instead of breaking you up into groups and have you work in groups if we were doing a workshop live and in person, tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to have something in front of you to write on, just so you can reflect as we go. So you're each going to do your own work and reflect as we go, because you're all in your own individual spaces in this journey right now. And because the topic is so broad, literally every slide I show you tonight could be its own workshop. And we could actually take the time to dig deep into each of them, work in groups, break out, come back together, play games, share, and grow together. So tonight it's just an introductory. It's like the sampler menu. You get a little piece from this cake, a little piece of this cupcake, a little bit of this icing. You try them all and you see which ones work for you or that you like. Okay, so hopefully you have something in front of you to write on a little bit, and we'll start to go through this. And I will try to be as informative as I can without getting too stuck on any individual idea, so that there's lots of room at the end, hopefully, for questions that you want to ask that may be more unique or specific to your situation or to your individual journey, or the journey of the team that you're working with, the athletes you're working with, or the organization that you work with and work for. Okay, so having said that, we're going to try by starting off with I'll put up a slide, hopefully for you to see. We were working on it in the beginning. It was sometimes working, sometimes not. I know you see a black screen right now, but you should see behind you. There we go. The discussion for tonight is this notion of a rights-based model for player development. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. If it will let me move my way through here. So if nothing else, at the end of the night, I hope you can take this away from the discussion that we have, and a little bit of the learning. And that, of course, is what is a rights-based model for player development. Primarily, it's a space where athletes' voices are heard. This is the most important point behind a rights-based model. Is it a space and place where young people or athletes or both can have their voices heard, especially primarily in the decision-making process, when those decisions directly impact them. Okay. Are their voices valued? So is weight given to it? It's not just performative. They don't just say things. You don't ask them questions, but only, give them other answers. You allow them the opportunity to be stakeholders in whatever it is that you are building, wherever you are building. Is their well-being prioritized? Okay, so I know we're in this world right now where we talk a lot about the importance of winning and we talk a lot about the importance of development. And we have this argument that says that one or the other can happen. They both can't happen at the same time. I kind of believe that winning is good for development, believe it or not. And I think that it's good for the psychological, social, emotional experiences of our athletes and our young people. But I guess the question is at what cost? So we have the well-being, the wholeness of the physical, the emotional, the social, the psychological. That has to be at the forefront of the decisions that we make. And then, of course, the agency of the athlete is nurtured. So they are encouraged to be self-guided explorers on their own journey as athletes. As coaches, we are mentors. As coaches, we are Sherpas. We are guides. We are not the athletes themselves. And the sooner we can help them find their way as self-guided, the greater opportunities for success exist for them. My argument, of course, is that this best happens by integrating the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Sustainable Development Goals into our training environments. So what is the UNCRC? What are the SDGs? Here I'm going to stop my share for a second because I built a cheat sheet for you. Okay, and it's just a Google Doc, and I'll pull it up right now. It's like the really, really simplified version of these two big themes. I'll put it up here. I will share it with Allison, who can make it available to anyone who wants it. It's not a very good cheat sheet, but it's probably good enough to help you pass the test. Okay, so let's see if I can pull it up here. Um, Make sure I have the right document present. I'm going to have to just slide over and pull it forward. Here we go. Beautiful. This should be good. This, I'll take me out from this one now, and you should hopefully see just the cheat sheet itself. All right. So when I say the UNCRC, what I'm talking about is the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's from the United Nations. It has been around since 1989. Canada was one of the primary nations in helping it be drafted and put together. And what it suggests is that anyone under the age of 18, anywhere in the world, should have access to a series of basic fundamental human rights. Canada has signed this. Canada has ratified it. And when we ratify something like a convention, it's no longer a declaration legally. It means it's actually placed into law in the home country. So you'll see some of these key points here: the right to play, the right to be heard, the right to protection, the right to development, the right to inclusion. And I've given you which article it is beside there, and just a couple of words beside, in what we say is child-friendly language, what the article refers to. The point, of course, is that this should all be law in our country, in Canada, and yet a lot of this goes unrecognized in lots of primary spaces of young people's lives. And sport, of course, is a primary space of young people's lives. Organized sport in particular, young people spend more time in organized sport on average than they do at home with their primary caregivers in Canada, believe it or not, on a daily basis across a week. You can have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 or more hours per week dedicated to to competitive sport in particular. And often young people in Canada don't get that much one-to-one time with their primary caregivers. So these rights belong there. What are the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, more recently, we have these 17 goals adopted by the UN to promote the core ideas of human rights, but also environmental rights and so forth. And these are, good health and well-being, education, gender equity, peace and justice. And it's about changing the optics by which we measure global success, maybe away from dollars and cents and more towards what is most important to human life and successful, safe, happy human life. These sustainable development goals, you'll start to see a lot more around the globe, and a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations are taking them on as primary guidelines for how to govern. But really, what we want to talk about here in sport, because we have to create spaces and places where all children, all young people, regardless of their background, gender, or ability, get equal opportunities to play. We want to create, we want to educate coaches to prioritize athlete well-being over short-term success. Uh, but not to see it as an either or. I'll talk about that a little bit later. We want young people to develop the skills through sport that they'll take through the rest of their lives, and we want organizations to continue to contribute to a better society, right? And all of this happens when we embrace this approach and bring it into our everyday coaching. Okay, so that's the really quick blurb. Hopefully, you got a little bit about what the UNCRC is if you hadn't heard of it yet. Hopefully, you got a little bit about what the SDGs are if you haven't heard about it yet. But I encourage you to Google both of those. There are some great visuals of all the different SDGs or all the different rights from the Convention of the Rights of the Child with little blurbs beside it to help you sort of see and piece it all together. And there's some great they're they may seem at the beginning like they're very different from what we do as coaches, but what I hopefully show you today is some of the ways that they're really deeply interconnected and really easy to bring together in what we do. All right, let's come back to my PowerPoint. Oh, one more. Sorry, I'll try that one more time so that I can also be present. There we go. Perfect. So what I want to do now is give you a chance to see sort of where you're at in this process. And this is where we start the workshop component, right? This is really where we let you do the work now. And so I would say is on a scale of 1 to 5, I want you to rate yourself on the following 10 criteria. So I'll show you criteria and I'll ask you a question. 1, I don't do this. 2, I rarely do this. 3, I sometimes do this. 4, I often do this. 5, I always do this. Okay. And I had said here 10 criteria, but I've actually cut it back. We're only going to work with 6 tonight. Okay. We're just going to, in the interest of time, because I really want to make sure there's time to talk later about the things that you do and the questions that you have. So I'm going to show you 6 and just again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beside it. And again, if you want to know what are key attributes to a rights-based approach to coaching, here they are. So the first one was the athlete voice and participation. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how often do you seek and incorporate athlete input into your training plans, into your game strategies, or into your team decisions? 1, nope. 5, always. 2, 3, 4, somewhere in between. Okay. Second big idea would be decision-making autonomy. So do you provide opportunities for athletes to make decisions about their training, themselves, about their gameplay themselves, about their personal development themselves? 1, never. 5, always. 2, 3, 4, somewhere in the middle. Okay, so athlete voice participation, decision-making autonomy. I'll give you about 30 seconds and then I'll move to the next 2. I'm not collecting it, by the way. I'm not going to see it. No one else is going to see it. You don't have to share. You can be as honest as you like. Everyone gets a gold star, regardless. Okay, constructive feedback and growth mindset. So, do you use feedback with the athletes you work with that encourages reflection and learning rather than focusing only on performance outcomes? I'll say that one more time. Do you use feedback or tools for feedback, feedback channels, which encourage reflection and learning rather than focusing only on performance outcomes? 1 for never, 5 for always, 2, 3, 4 for something in the middle. Let's dig down a little bit on that. Athlete-led reflection and learning. Do you engage athletes in self-assessment and self-reflection? Do you allow them to evaluate their own progress and set their own goals? 1 for never, 5 for always, 2, 3, 4 for somewhere in between. Okay. Take a moment. You can see the slide, hopefully, without me in the way, and you can reflect. So just to reiterate, Number one was athlete voice and participation. Number two was decision-making autonomy. See how they're connected? Number three was constructive feedback and growth mindset. Number four was athlete-led reflection and learning. Final two for tonight. Safe and supportive communication. So do you encourage open, respectful dialogue where athletes that you work with, they feel safe to express their concerns, safe to ask questions, safe to share ideas? One for never, five for always, two, three, four for somewhere in between. Rarely, sometimes, often. Right? Two, three, four. And lastly, holistic well-being support. Do you prioritize the athlete's well-being, addressing their mental, emotional, and physical health in your coaching? Addressing their mental, emotional, and physical health in your coaching. One for never, five for always. Rarely, sometimes, often, two, three, four. Take a moment and just reflect. Now, if we were in person and we were working on like a full day workshop or we had more time, I'd now give you the opportunity maybe to turn and share with someone else in the room, or maybe as a group, you might rank these as to which ones you think were, would require the most amount of engagement from you as a coach or from your organization. But in the interest of time, and like I said, today's the starting point of our journey together, but also, maybe your journey with this subject. Let's just add up what we did, see how we did. So you had six of these. Okay, each one you could have put down one, two, three, four, or five. One, right? We had six of these that we went through. And so let's see what you did. How did you score? Add it up. If you're over 24, 24 to 30 in that range there, right? You're probably already working in an environment that we would say is player centered or rights based. You may not know of the UNCRC or the SDGs, or you might, but you're already probably working with a lot of practices and ideas and communication strategies that are, helping your athletes to feel empowered and engaged on the field and off the field. And if you're in that number right now, what I'm going to suggest, for you is, share what you do. Share what you do with the people you work with the players you work with other coaches, and then maybe do a bit of research on the UNCRC and the SDGs to see where you can, maybe even go a little bit further. But well done. If you're somewhere between 18 and 24, you're also probably doing a lot of this already, but there may be some gaps here in either the knowledge base, because you're not familiar with these terms. What's a rights-based approach? What's the UNCRC? What are the SDGs? Or what I found most often with coaches in sport is it comes to areas like decision-making autonomy or athlete-led reflection. So where we start to hand over some of that authority that we've had and held on to as coaches for so long. That tends to be the spot where maybe, most coaches I work with or organizations, that's kind of where we hit that wall. So what I would say to you is find one or two areas, where from tonight's presentation or from our conversation or from your own research, where you can maybe look to get more athletes involvement. Voice, well-being, participation. What could that look like? Maybe can make an action plan on how you would go about doing that. And we'll go over some ideas about that in a minute. If you're less than 18, all right, I know it says 24 to 30 there, but it shouldn't. It should say less than 18. Uh, I'm going to say that you recognize that there's an importance to this, because obviously you're here at the seminar, which means you're interested in the topic. But my guess is that, from my experience, you're still deeply embedded in a more traditional coach-driven model of the relationship between athletes and coaches, and a communication style that really, reinforces a power dynamic between the coach and the athlete. And so how can we move out from that? I would say really want to focus on athlete participation, really working on getting the athlete more involved in all areas. Here I write down training plans, self-assessment, etc. You probably need to start small because what we're asking here, or what you're going to be asking of yourself, is probably a big change. You're handing over power. You're handing over, you're still being able to share your expertise, but you're doing it in a different way where it's more from a space of encouraging the athlete to engage with it rather than telling the athlete what is best for them. And then, of course, you can do this probably best by incorporating the UNCRC or the SDGs into your practice. So I really encourage you to go and do a little bit more reading on that. So I'm just going to stop share there for 1 second just to check in with the room before we move on to the next part. But that's really the introduction to the ideas and kind of where you are with the ideas. What I want to do now is a case study. So I'll put up a case study. I'll read it out to you. And then what I'd like to do is go through each of those same 6 questions that I asked you to ask yourself and share with you some strategies that you might consider if you were this coach in this scenario based on these 6 categories that we each just self-reflected on. Is that okay with the group right now? Or is there anything up until this point that requires a little more depth and a little more discussion before going forward? Okay. Again, this is a lot more talking from me than normal, but so it's a little bit of a different type of interaction or a little different type of workshop. Again, we're virtual. The topic is largely new, and there's a lot of material I want you to at least see as the starting point for engagement. And if we had more time or if we run more of these workshops, we can pick one of these and really dig down and do a lot more group-based work. But it's really about with a new topic like this, it's really about just setting a common language so that we can all share with a base level of knowledge around it before we start to interact and then break it down to collectively. Okay, so let's then go back to where we were. Pull up the PowerPoint. It will, just 1 second. Okay, this is the short version of the scenario. I'm going to tell you about Coach Alex. I'm going to tell you about the athletes that Coach Alex is engaged with. And I'm going to tell you about what Coach Alex wants to do to improve. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how coaches can foster athlete autonomy, the well-being, and the engagement without compromising performance. Because this is the biggest roadblock that I come up against when I work with organizations, I work with individual coaches. It's like, well, I understand what you're saying, Steve, and I'm interested in all of these things, but I have to win. And it's incredible what we're willing to trade off for victory or what we think is victory or success or what we think is success. And again, just a couple of days ago, I was in Costa Rica. I was working with Guyana with their national team for their U17s in soccer, and we were competing in the World Cup qualifiers, trying to get with CONCACAF, trying to get to the U17 World Cup in Qatar later this year. And just the number of experiences that I was placed in as a coach and that I observed from other coaches, both within the team of Guyana that I was working with, or the teams that I was competing against, or other teams that were staying in the hotel we were staying at, where this bumped up against each other. What am I willing to trade off in order to achieve what I think success looks like? It was an excessive number. It was a lot. So it's a very real problem, and it exists, and I think we all face it. I want to show you read you the full case study, and that's what I'm pulling up right now. Which then you can see the whole thing here. All right. So Coach Alex is a seasoned coach working a high performance youth soccer team in Atlantic, Canada. I picked youth soccer because that's where I work the most, and so I hope you'll engage me with that. Thank you. The team consists of players 14 to 17 because I know that sometimes, in certain regions, the player pool is smaller, and so you have players who span, particular age years versus a place with a much larger player pool where you might have 200 to 300 kids. So you would have all just 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds, etc. So Coach Alex is committed to developing top performing athletes, but it's recently been challenged by the concerns players, parents, and a lot of it's again this balance between competition, player well-being, and athlete autonomy. So Coach Alex already does some things that I would say are very good and has a mid-season review and a check-in with players. Way to go, Coach Alex. Some of the players expressed feelings of being overwhelmed by the intensity in training or lacking input in team decisions, unsure of their roles in the team strategy. Others noted that they sometimes hesitate to ask questions or worry about making mistakes in games. Now, all of these, by the way, I will tell you, are real concerns raised by teenagers that I've worked with in soccer across the country of Canada when asked anonymously to share where their concerns are in the game and in the sport that they play. And a lot of this, of course, is around the recent spike in anxiety in young people that we see. And so we've been trying to do some work on that. So these are all real things that have been raised. So Coach Alex wants to shift towards this rights-based coaching model, aligns with athlete voice, well-being, autonomy, but Coach Alex is unsure where to begin and how to integrate these ideas without compromising team performance. Okay, so that's the situation that we're working with. And again, if we were all together, I'd break you up into groups. I'd ask each group to pick one of the questions, talk about what they would do. We'd come back and we'd share, we'd put it all up and we'd walk through it all in a much more collaborative fashion. But due to the restraints of space and time, I'm going to share with you some of these ideas right here. Okay. So here we, there. Oh, so let's start with the first one, athlete voice and participation. I asked you, how often do you actively seek and incorporate athlete input into training plans, game strategies, and team decisions? So what could Coach Alex do? Well, here's one possible solution. Assign leadership roles within the team. So that way we get player contributions. In the same way that in your workplace, you might have different committees. So there might be a committee, who's in charge of warm-ups for the team, or there might be a committee who's in charge for, the themes that we're going to study this week, or breaking down game film from the previous week, or, it can be any of the areas that are traditionally yours as the head coach or as a primary coach and a coaching staff. You can allocate some of that responsibility to one or to a committee of players on the team and ask them to bring contributions forward. It doesn't mean you no longer do that, but it might be the starting point. They might become your chat GPT, right? Or your Google, where you start with their ideas and then you build from that in your team meetings or in your training sessions. Second one here could be anonymous surveys, digital platforms that allow your athletes to share feedback without pressure. A lot of young people are nervous around sharing their feedback with a coach or any person in a position of authority, especially if their playing time is directly connected to that. And so, if you have an opportunity where there can be anonymous feedback, you might be surprised at what you see or what you receive. And then, of course, I would say, another way to do this is to regularly, not just at a mid-season check-in or preseason check-in or end-of-season check-in, have some regular meetings, and they can be athlete-led. So it can be your committee that you have, or it could be a council of captains, or this isn't a team scenario, obviously, where the players discuss with each other what's working in training, and they suggest adjustments, and then that then gets passed on to you or to your coaching staff. If you're working with an individual athlete, you can have these regular meetings ongoing, again, where they are participating not just in telling you about how they feel, but also about how they feel about the process of the training. Not if the training is helping them get better, faster, stronger. All of that should already be happening, and I imagine is, but how do they feel about how the training is designed? How do they feel about what the pattern of training, the order of training, the hours of training? Like ask them about the process as well. Get them involved in the design of the learning environment. What about decision-making autonomy? So we said you provide opportunities to make decisions about their training, their gameplay, their personal development. And again, a lot of this you're going to start to see now becomes overlap. Solution two here is let team captains or senior players co-lead warm-ups or tactical discussions. Here I go to the Golden State Warriors, one of the most successful NBA basketball teams over the last 20 years. And head coach Steve Kerr has been seen before in timeouts, giving the clipboard to Steph Curry or Draymond Green or one of the players on the team, and letting them draw up the play of what's going to happen when they come out of the timeout. Your players, your athletes, what levels they're at. They're all at different spaces and places, but why not encourage some of them to take a more leadership role and allow them that opportunity? Um, for solution one, this can come from giving, again, getting to know your players. So communication is so important, and providing options for drills based on their needs and development areas. And here is one time I was coaching a group of U16 futsal players, and we were training to go to the United States Nationals because we had qualified for the Nationals. And it was the week before, and as they came into the gym for training, there was a whiteboard, and on the whiteboard there was one magnet with each player's name on it, and then there were 8 different names of activities. I didn't describe the activities, but I gave them all cool names. And each player, before they could come into training, had to take their magnet and put it next to the name of the activity that they wanted to try or play. And then afterwards, whatever the ones were that had the most votes, that's what we did that day at training. And the feedback from the players afterwards was a kind of excitement. They didn't know what this was, but it was kind of cool, or they had never been asked before. And I'm not going to say they trained harder or better. I don't have any data to support that. But when I asked them for feedback, they enjoyed that option. Okay. And lastly, encourage athletes to set their own individual performance goals and track progress. You should always be working with athletes where they are the driving force towards what their success looks like. Help them get the big picture, help them make, smart goals, help them define what all the steps are along the way, help them to take ownership and to activate each of those, small steps along the way. Allow them in the process. And when their individual goals, if you're in a team sport, line up with the team's overall goals, that's when we see real success. Success for the team, success for the individual, and of course, great development happens for the individual when their individual goals line up with team goals. Constructive feedback, growth mindset. I asked a little bit about this. What went well? What could improve? These are just easy questions to ask that allow them to be the driver in the narrative. Rather than being directive and saying, you did this, you did that, you could have done this. Did you see that? Why didn't you do this? How about this? Even questions like, how about this? Why can't we ask a different question? The questions I like to ask at halftime in soccer games or afterwards, I always like to say when they come in at halftime, I say, okay, what does success look like for us? And then I wait. Okay, so when we found success, what did it look like? Oh, okay. Well, what were the steps that we took to find that success? Okay. When we struggled, what did it look like? How might we overcome that? Right? So we can ask questions that allow them to be part of the process. Players can self-reflect before receiving coach feedback. Ask them the questions, let them put it back in. Or one of my sons plays on a soccer team right now where in order to be rostered for the soccer game the following week, they have to watch the game film from the previous week and come up with 1 or 2 ways that they can improve their performance for next week. It's interesting. It's an interesting way to engage your players, but why not? Lastly, of course, normalize mistakes, right? There are so many examples of professional athletes from Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant tend to be the two most famous when I talk to athletes that they tell the stories of, people who've overcome failure to reach the next level. But mistakes are part of the learning process. Let's not celebrate mistakes, but let's just normalize it. Let's not like make it be so dramatic that failure is great for athletes because it's not. It's like the opposite of what we try to achieve in high performance sport. But let's also normalize the fact that it's part of sport, right? You win some, you lose some. And when we lose or when we don't have the success that we want because of something that we did personally, right? Then it's time to analyze how did that happen? And what can I do for next time so that doesn't happen? That's where growth happens. That's what we want to encourage. Last couple. Do you engage athletes in self-assessment reflection? Let them evaluate their own progress. Yeah, have players fill out post-practice reflections, what they learned and what they want to improve on. Again, if you have SMART goals with your players, you have overarching team goals. We want to win the Canada Games this coming summer, right? We want to compete at the Canada Games. We want to place in this position or higher in the Canada Games. Great. Individually, what do you want to do to help the team achieve that? Individually, what would you need to do to help to reach that? Like we can have, and then you can have an ongoing check-in process where they're reflecting on how they're doing to meet their goals and to meet the team goals. Uh, I just told you about some video analysis where they review their performance, suggest adjustments. That was an example with my son's team, but the same idea. Encourage them to review their own performance, and then to seek the answers to where they're not meeting maybe their own goals or their own expectations. Now, you can always share with them, right? Your coaches, for many of you, you were athletes once in the same sport. So you have a vast amount of expertise, subject matter expertise, and experience. Share that. Absolutely. Share that. Don't hide from that. Don't run from that. But also allow them, though, to be the primary driver in in how they digest whatever it is that you share with them. And peer feedback can be really good here too. I often like to, break up my teams into groups. Maybe if they have similar roles. So for soccer, it's very easy. I usually use defenders, attackers, and midfielders, three different groups, and I have them work in groups to do feedback with each other based on some of the things that we're working on, maybe on a particular theme or for a particular session. And I'll often let them design what it is that that we want to get at and how we would train for it. And then the last one, safe and supportive communication. Do you encourage open, um, respectful dialogue where they can feel safe to share their concerns, where they can ask questions, where they can share ideas? So maybe you have a council of captains instead of one captain if it's a team environment, really where players can share their ideas, where they know how to sort of, what's the best channel for communication. You can use one-on-ones if you need to talk to athletes about individual experiences. Although if you're doing one-on-ones, it should really be, I'm just going to put rule of three here. Okay, make sure that it's never just you and a young athlete by yourselves having those conversations, that there's always a second coach with you. All right, just to, for obvious safe sport reasons. And then the one here I really want to encourage you to think about is your own vulnerability as a coach, right? Especially if you were an athlete in that sport before, sharing that, times where you were unsuccessful and then where you sought help or expertise, where you received feedback and where you use that feedback to find growth and success can be a great model as well for the young people that you work with. When you're focused on their well-being, not just the physical health or their physical, success in sport, although, a lot of that is there, definitely. You get the opportunity to help this athlete deal with the highest level of pressure, which they will enter into if they're high performance athletes, preparing for Canada Games, preparing for Olympic Games, preparing for provincial championships, national championships, whatever it may be. So, do you have any sessions anywhere in your training or in the athletes training that you work with that are specific to recovery? And I don't mean physical recovery. Like in soccer, we always have match day plus ones, right? Where we lower the physical load that we place on the players. But what about the cognitive, right? Do we have mental health sessions? Do you do mindfulness? Do you ask your players to do journaling? Do you have built into your training sessions yoga or meditation of some kind, grounding where the players, I was with the team in Guyana. Well, we had a performance coach who came in and worked with us who, after every training session, the players took off their socks and shoes to do the cool down so that their feet were touching the grass. Super interesting. Never saw that before. Absolutely love it. Right? So what are you doing there? Do you have a check-in system where athletes can rate their mental and physical readiness before practices? If you use an app, I think it's Team Snap, I think it is now, has in their paid features where athletes can check in how ready they are for training before they come to training. But I mean, maybe implement some type of system, even just, how's everybody feeling tonight at the start of practice? Close your eyes and hold up a one, or two, or a three. One, coach, I'm ready to train in 100%. Two, coach, I got some stuff going on. I'm only feeling so-so. Three, coach, I'm not really in the best place, but I'm here, and then everyone closes their eyes, they stick their hand up, they put up a one or two or three, and you just take the temperature of the room. And they get to know that they're being heard rather than they just show up to train. You don't know what their day was like. You don't know if they got in a fight with mom and dad on the way to training, if they haven't eaten any food all day, if they just broke up with their partner, if they just failed the test, like a little check-in can go a long way. And then, of course, the third one is partner with someone in your neighborhood, like a sports psychologist, a mentor, like even like someone who does yoga and stretching. Have them come in, connect to the community. The more our teams and our athletes are connected to their community, connected to their environment, the natural environment, the more holistic the space becomes, and the more connected we become together, and that helps. Again, it takes a village, and everyone always feels better when there are multiple support networks. So tap into the networks that are already there and the resources that already exist near and around you to help with mindset for your athletes. Okay, and I'll close here, and then I'm going to open it up because I really want to give you the chance to ask questions that matter to you. I know I've shared a lot, but I would say based on tonight's discussion, can you think about, jot down for yourself, which areas are strongest in your coaching? Because I've talked about a lot of things tonight, and I'm pretty certain that many of you are doing many of these things already. So which ones are your strongest? Take a moment, reflect on that. What do you already do well, right? When we have success, what does it look like? Write it down. And then were there some questions that were asked tonight that demonstrated to you that there's some space here for growth for you? That were there opportunities that maybe you hadn't thought about? Oh, that's interesting. I can try that. Or maybe I'll look more into that. Or you know what? This is a spot where I gave myself a 2 or a 3, but I know I can be a 4 or 5. What does that look like? Maybe you write that down right now. And then I really, at every workshop, I always ask coaches to leave by asking, what's one specific, and I want you to write this down before I take any questions from the group. Like, what's one specific thing that you can do like right now? So if you're coaching tomorrow, or you coach next, if you don't, maybe on the weekend or early next week, what's one thing? Hopefully, there's one thing you've taken, if nothing else, from here tonight that you can do right away with the athlete or athletes that you're working with. What might that be? So take a moment just to quickly, I guess, like journal or reflect yourself on these final thoughts, and then we will open it up to the floor for questions, comments, etc. I guess Allison, maybe I'll ask you whenever you're ready, or if you want to maybe field whatever questions there might be. If people want to type them in the chat, they can type them, or if they want to raise a hand, then I'll ask you to maybe navigate who goes in what order, and I'm happy to take any questions from the floor.
Great. Fire away, everyone. All right. Quick hand up. Guy/Gee. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Come on, Alison.
Guy.
We've met before.
We've met, and I know.
And the accent gives it away. I'm very much an Anglophone, so I'm a guy. And Steve, I've been lucky enough to be in these forums with you before. Fantastic. A lot of information very quickly, trying to digest it and keep up. But one quick question. You talked about peer feedback sessions where players highlight the strengths and areas for growth amongst teammates. How do you create an environment where that is absolutely safe, or not even so much safe, where actually players, and I coach, you mentioned 14 to 17-year-olds, that's typically what I coach. I'm not sure I'd get much candid feedback from a player over another player. How would we achieve that?
Yeah, it is. Someone's put in the comments, great question. Absolutely. That's the hardest thing, right? Feedback is the hardest thing. How do we create spaces for feedback, even just from coaches with players, let alone players amongst players? And I'll tell you, the key to quality feedback, first and foremost, is relationships. So you have to build relationships with your players, both you as a coach with the players and then the players with each other, where it's comfortable and safe to do that. So on day one, I wouldn't start with a peer feedback session, right? But after a season together with a team where we've grown together, where we've maybe competed in tournaments together, where we've won together, where we've lost together, where we've built those bonds together, hopefully I've fostered throughout that season the types of community where we're now safe to share in that. So it's not like a start tomorrow thing. It's something you build towards. So in terms of like long-term goals, medium-term goals, short-term goals, it's a long-term goal that we can start on right away. And the way we do that is, as a leader, we model the type of communication we want from our players. End of story.
Yes.
If you're not modeling that, you're not getting it from your players. So you have to show them directly, what it means to communicate in a feedback style that is safe and comfortable and encouraging and positive and all of those things. And that takes time to show them. The other thing, like I said, is you have to build this relationship of trust amongst your players with each other. So giving them small tasks and opportunities where they can make mistakes and test it out a little bit to feel what it's like and safe. So what I would say here is, the first area for feedback that I might ask them on is players to coach. So now so they can try it out where I'm the person who's being given the feedback. So if they make a mistake, if it's too harsh, if the language isn't appropriate, it's directed towards me, and I know that going into it. So it allows me to help then encourage them with some examples of different language they could use next time to share the same idea, etc. Maybe if the sport that you're working with, let's say, was ice hockey, maybe what you do is you watch a game together as a team. Okay, so you have like a team event, team bonding event or whatever, and you watch a game if there's a big game going on, like let's say Canada versus USA in hockey, right? So
I'd
you
throw a
watch,
punch.
right? You watch that game together, and then you break your players up into small groups, and you give them each a topic to provide feedback on. And so now they have a chance to work through it and try it out, and they test it out, and they get to share it amongst each other, right? And then like slowly as you build, you get to the point where it's like, okay, now we have examples of how to give feedback. We've tried it out. We've done it before. We have a community of trust amongst each other. And then what I would do is the first couple times I had it done in groups, I would work as the moderator to help those conversations happen safely. And then eventually you build to the spot where you no longer even need to be in there. But again, that's like a long pathway, but you can start on it today with some smaller, steps along the way.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
I saw Marvin, but have you taken your hand down? And then Kenzie after Marvin.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on Guy's question there. So it's really around what you said around incorporating mental health sessions and things like that for the team. But my question is, how do you make sure you do that without like alienating somebody who maybe is like the reason that you need to incorporate that? Maybe something's come up, but you don't want to alienate that individual. So just keeping that in mind.
Yeah, so I mean, like my basic coaching philosophy, I would turn to first, and I would say that mental health is in everybody. It's an everybody issue. It's an everybody concern, right? So if we have a series of best practices that include mental health days for our team or strategies to, make it again a safe, comfortable, encouraging, engaging, activating space, then that's not about like, oh, player X did this, therefore we all need to do this. No, it's like this is just what we do. The same way if we trained Mondays from 6:30 to 8:30 and Tuesdays we train at a different field because this field isn't available. Well, okay, well then maybe on Wednesdays, we work on this, and this might be something that is a little less fitness based or a little bit less technical based, but more social, emotional, psychological, right? We spend a lot of time with our athletes focused on training the body and a lot of times focused what we think is training the mind through tactical training. We can carve out a piece of time, either ongoing, once a week, or regular built-in check-in sessions, however you want to do it, that look to specifically create spaces to help with these issues. Man, young people right now, the rise of anxiety is like it's unbelievable. Like the numbers that we hit. It's an epidemic, right? If you ask the World Health Organization. So we have to come up with strategies that are going to help them be successful athletes. And if anxiety is an epidemic among young people, well, I mean, that means it's something that we need to be aware of and engaging with. Now, we're not healthcare practitioners. I should stress that. So I'm not asking you to be a mental health care practitioner. Lean on the people in your community or come up with some small activities that can help with that. It could even be something as simple as breathing. Even something as simple as breathing. Do you do any breath work with your players? Like with my players in soccer, we do breath work about taking a penalty kick. All right. So I taught them the idea of heart math. 1, 2, 3. You put your hand on your heart, that's one. You take a big deep breath in, that's two. And as you do that, you think of something that makes you really happy. And then with three, you breathe out and you radiate, right? And we just do that. And the players at first would laugh and joke, and they thought it was so silly. These were 16-year-old boys, and they thought it was the silliest thing they ever did. By the end of my first season, at every game when we would come in to put our hands into the huddle and be like, 1, 2, 3, and then you yell out your team name before the kickoff or the game starts, they would all get into the circle and they would all do heart math. They would go 1, breathe in, 2, 3, and then they would yell radiate, and then they would yell out their team name afterwards. So like everything is strange or different in the beginning, but it's about it's again what you sell them matters to them, right? So if it matters to you, it matters to them. If it's cool to you, it will be cool to them. If it's part of how your team operates, it's part of how your team operates. In the same way that if every time a player makes a mistake, you yell at them, that becomes the team culture. If you call players by names that are inappropriate, that becomes if you're the first bully in this kid's life, as the coach, if you use inappropriate language, if it's gendered, misogynistic, racist, homophobic, like that becomes your team culture. So we have the same power to do positive that a lot of our coaches have done in the past that have been negative. So that's what I would encourage.
Awesome. Kenzie, you're up next, then Adam.
I'm a team manager who also coaches, and mine, excuse me, is I coach bouldering, which I think we're very lucky in that it's quite inherent in its self-deterministic agency that we give the kids, because it's just, do you climb the climb or not? There's no real competitors, there's no anything. But I, both because of like who I am and my skill set I bring to the team, I definitely have kind of already established myself as the not easy, but like I am not a pusher. And so I just always worry, is there worry in being too far on that side? Like I mean, other than those parents or the kid who really wants to maybe make it to the Olympics or something like that. Like, is that something I should work on changing in myself and trying to give a little bit more drive, or is that something more I'm looking in when I pick the coaches and I create the team, that okay, I can be more of an opportunity for kids to talk about the mental health aspect, and then I can hire a coach who is more driven and forward in their momentum. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, well, it sounds like you already have the solution, right? If you occupy this role nicely, then it's best to hire coaches who occupy that
Okay.
role. I mean, that as long as you're collaborative in your approach as a team of coaches or managers or leaders, that sounds to me like it works. But just to add to that, like a rights-based approach doesn't mean that there's a lack of discipline, and it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
there's a lack of expectation, right? So like,
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
and in fact, if we're going to be authentic as coaches and we're going to help our athletes reach the highest level, then there's an onus on us as coaches to hold our athletes accountable to a standard. And that standard is whatever we set it to be. What you tolerate is what you receive as a coach. Same way as a teacher in a
Right.
classroom, right? What you tolerate is what you receive. So at the very beginning, when you start working with these athletes, I really think it's important that you goal set and that you goal set together. And you say, hey, as a coach, this is how I work. As a team, what are our goals going to be? And they'll say, oh, we want this, we want this, we want this. You say, okay, well then how do we get it? Oh, to get it, we need to do this and this and this and this. Okay, great. So let's start that journey together. Well, if along the way the players aren't meeting up to whatever the expectation is, well, as coaches, we have to hold them accountable to that, right? We have to say, wait a second, that's not good enough,
Mhm.
right? And I'll tell you something in terms of accountability and agency. When I turn to a player and I say, hey, that's not good enough. Like, you showed up for practice late, like twice this week. And they're like, I know, coach, but okay, fine. But when we sat down as a team and we said, these are our goals, and then we sat down and said, what are the steps we need to take to get there? One of the things that we came up with together was it matters that we all come to train, that we all come to train on time, that we're ready to train when we arrive, and that we give our best at training. But now you're not doing that, right? So like you can still have that discussion, but now they've already bought in, and they have to take ownership for themselves and why they haven't met the standard, right? Because they were part of building the standard. If you you know if it, so it's actually in my experience, it's been more helpful when it comes to areas of discipline, because they're part of the process of setting the goals and the expectations. But we should never be afraid to hold them accountable to whatever the standard is. The standard just has to be realistic. And the way in which you hold them accountable isn't yelling and screaming at them, telling them that they're worthless or they didn't do it or all of this. It's more like, hey, wait a second. I thought this is what we wanted. Okay, now how do we get to this? Why are we not getting here? What can I do to help support you to get here? What do you need to do differently in order to get there? It's just the same type of questions that we ask. Uh, so we're not
That's an awesome
ignoring. Yeah,
distinction.
we're not.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to. Sorry.
No.
Okay, we're getting tight on time, but Adam, I want to hear what you've got to say.
Sweet. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in because I work with Kenzie at Seven Bays, and when we were doing that initial assessment, I thought that the environment at the gym that we work at has a really nice way of allowing us to be in that like 24 to 30 range of the points, because there's this kind of focus on reflection and input that I really enjoy, that's helped me be a better coach, learn how to be a better coach. And what I'm learning from this too is the importance of the role that we can as coaches play for athletes' mental health, and also like the importance of that we're realizing it more broadly in sport, how powerful the mind is in performance generally, almost more so than the physical component. I just think of the example of like of an athlete taking a year off or missing a contest, and how that the views around that have shifted. And like now, just as an example, one of my favorite athletes in a sport that I watch just decided to take a year off, and I'm going, yes, actually that was a good move for you, like, and because you can see where they are in their development. And it's so I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but what role, short of being a clinical therapist, can we play for our athletes? And that's probably a huge question, but like, yeah, like what, and I think that it's been largely answered a lot in this session, but like, checking in and encouraging self-reflection, things like that. But if you guys could like give me a nice synopsis of it, like what role can we play for that mental well-being side? What presence can we offer like as coaches?
Yeah. So I didn't talk about this at all tonight, but the area that I work most in is the importance of play. So Article 31 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child is the right to play. And I mean, I've traveled all over the world with coaching and sport, and I've never, just in soccer, just where I have the most experience, I've never met a professional soccer player who doesn't love soccer, right? They love soccer. They love the soccer ball. They love the sport because the amount of precision that's required to reach the highest level in high performance sport requires the athlete to love the sport. And when we as coaches squeeze out that love in our quest for performance, we lose a lot of athletes. And even that doesn't mean we don't drive them. It doesn't mean we don't push them. It doesn't mean we don't encourage them to be their best. But and this is the answer to your question, when we build environments, training environments that are play-based, so they show up loving their training, even when it's
Yeah.
hard, even when it hurts, but when they love the sport they play, then we're good. I would say the most important thing you can do as a coach of a young person, especially in high performance, not I mean, that people always say, no, not in high performance, especially in high performance, is help your athletes love the spaces where they play, where they train, where they spend the largest amount of their life outside of maybe school, right? Whatever that space is, you get to design that as the coach. You are the play designer. Your name is coach, but it should be play designer, right? Because you
Yeah.
design the spaces and the environments where they come to play, even if it's individual, right? So you need to the most important thing you can do is create a space where they love to show up every day. And if you do that, the rest, everything else matters, but nothing matters as much as that. And if you do that, you're definitely getting 24, 25, 26, 27, 29 out of 30 without even realizing it, because what it takes to build those play spaces is the SDGs, is the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and so much more.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great answer.
Amazing questions, everyone. We are at 8 o'clock. So unless anyone has anything burning left to ask Steve, I am gonna call it a night. I do think we have much, much more that we could talk about, and hopefully this won't be the last time we see you, Steve, in one of our spaces. So thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to everyone for giving your Wednesday night to nerd out with us. And have a great night. I will send out materials and a link to this recording sometime tomorrow.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Sorry, Guy. I know you're Guy,
Thank
not
you.
Guy.
All good. All good. Have a great night. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Steve. I just wanted to jump on at the end. It's good to see you again. That was fabulous. I missed the start. I was so frustrated picking children up and like driving and Zoom wouldn't work, but